But let's just get started. I'll just kind of whip through some of the housekeeping things that I have because they are important and they do pertain to some of your accounts, if not all of them. So, and then we'll get right into Ben's talking about the what he did this week and some of the market stuff. So, definitely now's a great time to consider topping up your TFSAs. I believe the maximum is the same as last year, Ben, 6,000.
Yes, yes.
So if you want, if you haven't done that, a lot of people have already. They sent us notes, want to do it. If you have not done that yet, send me a note, scott.goodfellow@nbc.ca. Happy to do that. Happy to do that for you. You will probably be getting either later today or tomorrow an invite for Ben's famous 2021 look ahead presentation, which basically lays out the whole year and what he sees coming up and what he's looking to do throughout the year. Is that accurate? Is there anything else you want to add to that, Ben?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's I think it's either 5 or 6 years now I've been doing it, and it's a real great time, I think, for me to think about what happened last year and how accurate or not accurate I was in certain places. And I take a lot of time prepping it, and it's important to think about what's ahead, because these weeklies will get caught up in what's happening on a short-term basis. But I think it's good to have that conversation around the longer term basis, what I think happening over the short, medium term, and long term. It's an important way to kind of think through that process.
Definitely. Okay, I had a couple other things, but they were all related to our live stream, such as our social media and our comments and questions, stuff like that. So we'll save that maybe for next week. We're not giving up on it. I know it's frustrating. We're not giving up on it. So please stick with us with that. Hopefully we'll get the bugs ironed out. So Ben, why don't you talk about a little bit about what happened in the markets this week? It was a bit of a fluctuation as we've seen kind of most weeks. But why don't you let us know what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, a big week in politics in the U.S. certainly, and the majority of people I talk to, I think, are sick of hearing about it now. But officially, they have a new president of the United States, President Biden. The market's actually taken a bit of a breather since he's come in. The U.S. markets, looks like the Dow closed down about 180 points. NASDAQ was slightly on the positive side, S&P's down, and TSX down as well. So since he's got in, he's announced some packages. I think we should expect to continue to see more and more of that, which is more of the fiscal packages. They're going to continue to do what they can to pump money into their economy. We continue to see the employment numbers a little bit worse than expected. So I'd expect them to continue to bang the drum and making sure they're trying to put money into people's pockets there. So that was a big one. On the back of that was the pipeline, was Keystone. Lots of people concerned about what's happening with the Keystone. Certainly the Canadian government seems to be. Yeah, if you saw my daily today, I know it was a little bit late going out, had a couple of meetings this morning. So, but in that first chart there, you'll see, Keystone, while it doesn't look like it's going to happen, there's a heck of a lot of pipelines all over Canada, United States. So oil and gas is still going to be flowing. That's not going to stop. I think we should take what the media says with a grain of salt when we're thinking about, is this going to have a major impact on Canada or not? And then obviously we can talk a little bit about what I did, but that's kind of the two, I'd say, key things from what happened, politics and pipeline kind of issues. Was there anything else that you saw, Scott?
No, I mean, obviously crypto sold off a whole bunch. Again, we don't like to bang on that drum too much. Yeah. And a few of our clients, probably a couple that are on here, sent us some articles, yes, right? That definitely show some of the flaws about it. Even though we're talking about it, right? We're not really biased one way or another. I think it's in the news so much, and it's it's been such a volatile investment that I think we have to talk about it. I don't think there's anything quite moving nearly as much as that is. So happy to receive it, any more of those things. But yeah, a huge sell off the other day, but it looks like it's come up, not all the way back, but it's headed back to where it was anyway. So
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, I had obviously a conversation with one of our senior management, which we talked about. We had a discussion around it. It's one of those things like the volatility, while it continues to be, I guess, high relative to some asset classes, volatility's come in a lot on it as it gets more and more established. And as I've talked before, I think the regulation is a good thing, not a bad thing. So, there's this kind of fear that regulation is going to be bad for it. I think in order for the institutions to accept it and move on board with it, we need that regulation. I actually got a great institutional presentation that somebody sent along to me, which I haven't had a chance to go through in detail, but it kind of weighs the pros and cons for the institutions and the pensions and how they plan to implement it. So that should be interesting. I'll work some of that into my presentation next week. So that certainly was one that triggers some attention for sure.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess from a stock perspective, I looked and I apologize on the screen here. It looks like I'm sitting in the ocean, and I wish I was, but I had to jump over to my home computer, and this is the natural setting for the backdrop. But I'll go through a couple of things I did this week. Obviously, lots to watch. It was more of a watching week than anything. For a number of clients, I owned Nutrien, which is the old potash agrium combo. It's had a pretty good run here, so I trimmed some of that and added some of the proceeds into SNC-Lavalin and Galaxy Digital. So Galaxy Digital is a technology company that's figuring out how to work blockchain and set up tokens. So it's a Canadian company, but Mike Novogratz was the founder of this company, pretty relevant guy in the crypto space. The other holding that I'd added to, which I'd added last week, was Brazil, EWZ. So added to it a bit more this week. I'd say that was the majority of trades that I did this week. I'm starting to think about, we've had a little bit of a soft patch here. I don't think much has changed, though I still think we're in that upward trending pattern. We got some inflation here. And I don't think that's going to disappear short term. So on days like this, it's a chance to say, how are things reacting? What's looking good? Should I put more cash in and put that to work? So one of the other things anything on that, Scott, before I go on to the next part?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the other spaces that we follow pretty closely is just what's happening, what companies are raising money. We call it maybe the new issue, bought deal, debt raising space. And so I thought this would be kind of an interesting piece. Since we pay attention to it, it's something that not everybody sees or knows, but we had a number of companies raising capital last week. We had Dream Industrial REIT. We had Lithium America. We had a couple of lithium companies, Millennium Lithium, Enthusiast Gaming. These were a handful of companies that raised capital last week. The lithium deals traded pretty well, so it's interesting to see what the market likes. The REIT deal didn't trade very well, so always interesting to see what the sentiment is, who's selling, why they're raising money, what they're doing that for. So that was on the equity side. On the bond side of things, we saw NAV Canada do an issuance. We saw Videotron do an issuance. Province of Alberta, Province of British Columbia. And the one that was the hottest on the bond side this past week was Tourmaline, which is a gas company, oil and gas company in Canada. That one sold out in a couple of minutes. So I'm always interested to see why these companies are coming to market. Obviously, you kind of think intuitively that they come to market because they really need it, but there's a lot of good, fair reasons to raise capital, and sentiment always is interesting too. we get a chance to look at what the institutional interest is in this as well, and it tends to give you a good feel for what companies are doing and which companies are friendly with the institutions as well. So I thought that would be an interesting piece to add to this weekly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
So, anything else as far as what we're going to do for next week or what you're looking at? It's interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it'll be good to see what happens with Biden as he settles in here. Part of I think the backdrop of crypto sell-off was you had more of that Janet Yellen coming in and talking about the fact that she wants to do away with, or she said that it's kind of unruly people deal in cryptocurrency. I think that's how she referred to it. But yeah, I think obviously the same day we saw BlackRock come in, which is the biggest institutional investment manager. They manage a couple of $1 trillion. At the same time, come out in the same day say that this is something that they'd like to either have an ETF or some kind of investment available. So there's an interesting backdrop. As you listen to the rest of Yellen's speech, though, she talked more about regulation as you got into it. So what tends to typically happen is you get the news line or you get the kind of headline reading, and I think that's part of what happened there. And so I think you expect a lot more of what has happened with Yellen and Biden. We get a sense of what he did with Obama. I'm gonna assume you get similar kind of policy, so I'm gonna be watching that pretty closely.
Right. What do you think? Do you think if Biden comes out with any stimulus or anything like that, will that do you think that'll have effect on the markets at all?
I think it has to be pretty big for it to have an effect. I mean, we'd been listening to kind of Raoul Pal talk a few months ago, and so he seemed to think that if we saw a $5 trillion package, that would move the market. But if it's anywhere close to the kind of 2 trillion that you're expecting, I don't think it has a material impact. And I mean, when I say that, I mean a material impact on the markets. Obviously, $2 trillion is a lot of money, but I don't think it has a material impact. And one of the things is we get lots of talk in this fiscal or monetary and like all this money talk, and people think about this, these trillions of dollars flowing into the system. So when Biden does it, that's kind of fiscal spend. So most of that probably gets somewhere into the system, where the central bank would be kind of the monetary policy, right? So they've pumped a lot of money into the system, and people say, how come it's not getting used? Like, how come it's not flowing through and inflation's at 10% or anything along those lines? And so, one of the things that I want to just comment on is like the central bank in the U.S. Yes, they put a lot of money into the system, but the central bank doesn't lend directly to, it doesn't give money directly to individuals. And so right now what they do is they give money to the banks and hope that the banks are the conduit. They give money to the people, but the banks have no interest in lending right now. So you got all this money piling up in the institutions. I'll call it the M1 money piling up in the institutions, and kind of the M2, which is the money that doesn't flow out, is falling through the floor. So as the central banks talk about this CDBC, I guess, central bank digital currency, CBDC, so central bank digital currency. So I think people are confused that this is going to replace Bitcoin. Ultimately, I think what it does, it's going to allow the banks to put money directly into people's bank accounts. And so they're looking to kind of circumvent the banks and kind of force that money back into the system. So I think that we kind of get confused as we hear all these big numbers and thinking about how that's going to play out into the markets. So you got piles of money sitting around, but it's not being used very efficiently, and the banks don't really have a lot of interest in lending. So I think we're going to get a lot more attention from the central banks thinking about how do we really kickstart, if they do, and I think it's likely they do. How do we really kickstart it? And that's where you get that kind of money pushed out into the system.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if anybody has a question, you can raise your hand if you want to, talk directly. Use your microphone and headset. Do that. If you just want to type something, just go to the Q&A, click that open chat, and then you can ask a question that way. So just as far as before we wrap up here, if there's no questions, did you have anything else that you were looking at for this week ahead, or anything else that was interesting?
No, I think that there's going to be a lot of change now with Biden coming in. You've seen kind of the world leaders reach out to his team and talk about how do we kind of change course. And so I think for good or for bad, I talked over the last couple of years where we'd kind of reached peak globalization when Trump got in. It's kind of reversed back into that protectionism thinking. And now I think we're going to get some of that connection back. I did see that Biden's first call was going to be to Trudeau, so that's a real positive thing. And I think as we look at how things look as we go forward, we might get some more, working together, some more engagement. I know India said they're excited to work with the United States again, and I think you'll start to see some more of that engagement. So whether it's just talk or it's going to be a financial benefit for the countries, I guess we'll see. But right now, that'll be something to pay attention to.
Okay, great. I can't see on my side, but do we have any questions that you can see? Anybody raise their hand or ask any questions?
Let me see here. I think we might be. Oh yeah, I got one question here. Yeah, I'm just gonna bring Lyle in here.
Yep.
Just give him a second to unmute here. Hey, Lyle.
Hey, hi Ben, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you well.
Okay. Your thoughts on the following, ever Mr. Negative David Rosenberg in a release in the Financial Post a couple of days ago is stated, and I quote, "Life is not going back to normal, even if the market doesn't see it yet. Ready or not, America is headed back into recession."
Yeah.
Now, this is typical David Rosenberg. Wherever there's a cloud, he'll find a darker cloud.
Yes.
So he's got this recessionary trend based on the following: 3 months in a row of negative retail sales, personal income shrinking at 10% annual rate since August, jobless claims, 200,000 payroll decline in January, consumer confidence indexes rolling over, JP tracking of 30 million debit and credit card holders shows a negative year-over-year trend of 3% and on and on. So I don't know, is this just David, or has he got anything in his sales?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think that as I listen to him, and obviously I've known him quite so well for a long time, he made a great call in 2007, 2008, albeit a little early. I mean, like, I think that some of the biggest challenges that the typical economists have is they continue to get a bit caught up in looking at the specific numbers instead of the direction, the rate of change of those numbers, the flow of capital. And I think the one thing it doesn't really take into account is the amount of attention and urgency that the world central planners have. And you'd look at the leaders of the world plus the central bank leaders of the world, and they really have one school of thought, and maybe someone will change, but they have one school of thought, and that's to stimulate. So you know, they see this data too. They understand, and I believe that they're going to push hard on putting money into the systems and really trying to stoke that inflation. So yes, the numbers aren't great for sure. You know, the year over year numbers coming in the next couple of months will probably be pretty good. But on the other side of that, I guess we'll see. But I really think they wanna push with all they got to uh, to to stimulate the economy. So I think that's short term. I think as we've talked before, I think in the back half of this year, there's definitely some risks of slowdown. But I think short term, I think he's not right short term.
Very good.
Thanks a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody else there, Ben?
Let me just see here. Oops. Looks like I took Scott out here, so I think that's it. I think everyone's had their questions answered, except for Jose asking if we're gonna apply for the Governor General role, but not this year. Maybe another time in the future. Thank you all for attending. I very much appreciate your patience. We're working hard to make sure the technology and everything's working properly, and we have some rules around the video and the streaming, so we're trying to make sure everything works. We're going to triple test it next week and make sure that everything's up and running. The call is going to be, the annual call is going to be Thursday, 5 to 6:30, depending how long it goes. There'll be a presentation that goes with it as well. So I'll take you through the slides in the presentation when we do that. But I think that's it for today. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you all again. Thanks very much. Take care.